Hey guys, welcome to my first ride video on Ducati's fairly new Multistrada V2S. This bike starts at £16,400 here in the UK, and today we're going to discover whether or not it's worth that kind of money. If we're basing it on looks alone, well, I have to say I think it is, especially with the colour-coded luggage around the back. In terms of the engine, this has an 890cc V-twin, hence the V2 naming. Produces about 115 horsepower at 9,000 RPM and 92 newton meters of torque at 7,700 RPM. This weighs 202 kilos, which sounds light, and Ducati say that's a wet weight, but it's a wet weight without any fuel. And this has a 19-litre fuel tank, so by my reckoning, that's about 15 kilos. If you factor that in, then it ends up weighing 217 kilos. So almost exactly the same as, let's say, my F900 GS, which is still good going, but it's not quite as light as it might appear on paper. In terms of seat height, well, this particular bike out of the box, it's 830 millimeters, but this also has a little lowering device for smaller riders, which allows you to get on and off it a lot easier, especially when you have luggage around the back. It has a 19-inch front wheel and a 17-inch rear wheel. Right, before we jump on the bike, I thought we'd have a quick look around it because there is a lot going on. I do like this storm green. I know many people might say all Ducati should be red. This doesn't have keyless start. I think it is an option, but that's not a bad thing because I personally love putting a key in the ignition and turning it. When the key's in there and the ignition's on, the key can't come out and you know where it is. Quick look at these pannier bags. So whether we want to open the bag itself or remove them from the bike, we need to put the key in and open it clockwise. Then we need to lift this up if we want to have a look in the actual bag. That opens up like that. There's a little securing bungee in there. Not the biggest, I don't know what the volume is of them, but they're quite compact bags. But still, I'm sure very useful if you went touring. So then close that up. Now, if we want to remove the bag from the bike, we lift this one up and there's a little pull cord there. Try not to drop the bike. There you go. And then it should just be a case of lifting it off the bike. So that really couldn't be any easier. And as you can see, when it's off the bike is really clean. There's no sort of pannier rack there. And then putting it back on, well, I'm going to need to put this down because I think it would be tricky doing it one-handed. Just line those two up at the top there, make sure that is in there, and then just close that so it's locked, and then push that down, turn the key, and away you go. So now that bag is locked and it's locked on the bike. Now we're looking at the cockpit. So obviously we've got the fuel filler cap. We've already talked about the fact there's a 19-litre tank here, a really wide set of bars, Multistrada on there. All looks very nice. I have to say the fit and finish on the Ducatis that I've experienced have been a lot better than I thought and a lot better than I know Ducatis of old. But saying that, there is some cheaper plastics just around here. Yeah, they're probably not the nicest materials in the world that surround this, and that actually continues when we get to this adjustable screen. I mean, the plastics and stuff, yeah, they're not the nicest, but it does a really good job and is really easy to use. So although to look at not the highest quality plastics in operation and how effective they are, well, they seem to do a really good job, and surely that's the most important thing. So aside from those slightly cheaper looking plastics, everything else is really, really nice. We've got lovely Brembo brake lever, we've got a lovely Brembo clutch lever over here as well. These are all the menu controls, we've got hand guards, even the mirrors are really nice. Let's just turn the ignition on, have a quick look at the dash. I think this is exactly the same dash that was on the Panigale V2S that I was on a couple of weeks ago. I need to experiment more with it, but it's very clear. It's configurable. There are lots of things to go through, probably many of which I won't even touch the surface of when I've got this bike. because really what I'm interested in is what it's like to ride. Talking of what it's like to ride, let's go through some of the main controls here. Let's start with the mode controls. So there are actually 5 different modes on this bike. Sport currently, but we've got touring, urban, enduro, wet, plus the suspension control. So this has, I guess you'd call it adaptive damping or adjustable damping. You can see the electronics going into the top of the fork legs there, and the same around the rear end. We've got the horn, we've got some hazard lights down here, indicators, normal things. That's a flashing light up there, and cruise control, which I believe is standard. This also has heated grips, which is an added option. That button there is the lowering button, so it drops the rear end. I think not by much, but it just makes it easier to get on and off. And then that's the kill switch, and that is the starter button there. Something else to talk about is the rear shock, and actually I'm going to spin the bike around for that so you can see it. That is what I wanted to show you. The shock is actually mounted to the side of the swing arm. Very unusual setup, at least I've never seen anything like that before. Be interesting to see what the suspension is like on this bike, especially as it is adjustable or adaptive. I think that's enough of the static stuff. I'm going to stick the bike in the garage, go and have dinner with Lou, and you can join me tomorrow on the bike for all of the fun bits. Well, what a day to go out for a ride on a bike. The weather is just glorious. In fact, it's almost too warm. It was saying 25 degrees a minute ago. Now, for those of you that are new to my channel, hello. And let me just remind you that I am a beginner motorcyclist. I passed my license in 2022. I've only ridden a handful of bikes since then. I picked up my very own BMW F900 GS about 5 weeks ago, and I've not ridden it much. It's not even had its running service yet because I've been so busy with cars and with other bikes, especially with Ducati on the X Diavolo launch. Hopefully you've seen that video on the channel. Let's talk about this Multistrada V2S. Well, I've had it for the past 5 days and it goes back tomorrow. I'm not too sad because I'm swapping it with a Multistrada V4S. But I will miss this bike, and I think the V4S, its more expensive, bigger sibling, has got its work cut out for it, because this is a brilliant, brilliant bike. It has its negative points, which we will go over, but it has many, many positive points. The price, what, 17.5 grand, this one 18-ish grand as tested. Does sound like a lot of money, but as we talked about in the intro, well, you can definitely spend a lot more on motorbikes and adventure bikes these days. I think that 1300 GS I had about 18 months ago that I didn't feature on the channel, unfortunately, that was about 23 grand, and that's probably now 25 with inflation and price increases. So not defending the fact that this is really expensive, but that's just kind of a roundabout right with something that has a Ducati badge on it. The riding position, it's really, really nice. It's not perfect. The foot pegs seem a little bit high for me. Quick reminder, I am 6'4", so 1m93. But I've got used to it. It was when I jumped off my F900 GS, I literally left that with Ducati and jumped on this, and I felt a little bit cramped in the legs. But that's because, well, the F900 is quite a tall bike, and also I have fitted the higher seat, which I believe is an option on this bike. This one has the regular seat height. So I can't really criticise it for that.
but it's definitely worth trying if you are a taller rider. In terms of the actual cockpit length, well, it's fantastic. Really, really comfortable. Yeah, I can't complain at all. The screen, it does a relatively good job, but yeah, just not convinced by the materials that hold it up. I mean, there are some nastier plastics there, but like I said, it's very easy to adjust on the move or when you're stopped. But as you can see, it's definitely done a good job at catching lots and lots of flies. But because I'm a little bit too tall, I also catch a lot of flies on my visor and on my head, top of my jacket, etc. The controls and the infotainment, do we call it that? Well, I suppose we don't. Let's just call it the Speedo, the dashboard. It's all very nice, all very clear. I think there are a couple of different colour options. I've had it in this white the whole time and does a good job. There are 4 or 5 rider modes which we can play with. I've been in sport most of the time. When I knock it back into touring or urban, everything seems to soften off really nicely, so that adjustable suspension, or the adaptive suspension, definitely settles down. I need to shut the throttle to change modes, but when I put it into touring and enter, everything just feels a little bit softer, which is nice. And again, I rode it back from Ducati UK in touring before I played with the modes, and jumping off my bike, which has a good ride, well, this felt so much better. It is so comfortable. I can't tell you, on our roads that are horrific, it's very comfortable. So although this is an Italian stallion, don't think of it as a Ferrari or a hard-edged sports car. I know it's a adventure bike, a touring adventure bike, but yeah, it feels wonderful. And then when you couple in this seat, I mean, I had actually watched a couple of videos on this bike before collecting it, and everyone raves about the seat, and I can see exactly why. In fact, today I've now been in the saddle for nearly 2 hours. Unbelievably comfortable, and I don't have a sweaty bum, which is lovely. So ergonomics, space, riding position, controls, really nice. The buttons and stuff I'm not a big fan of. These, they look a bit, yeah, no, I'm not convinced by the actual button quality. They don't look as good as, say, BMW's switchgear, but the throttle, on the other hand, is nicer than any BMW that I've tried. And I remember thinking that, and I can't remember if I said it in my Diavel video, but the throttle on Ducatis is just so nice. It's like just so smooth, especially down low. Perfect timing as we're coming through this little village. I'm in first, and I'd probably be in second on my GS just because it's a bit jerky down low. But in this, it's just so nice, especially when you're in a lesser mode like touring and you're not up in sports. Something else to rave about, which might seem a little bit odd, are these side mirrors. I think that's what you'd call them on a bike. They do a fantastic job of showing me what is behind, and that might sound odd to someone who hasn't been on a motorbike before. But again, comparing it to anything that I've tried on a BMW, well, you could see everything through these. There's a tiny bit of my shoulder or my arm in the shot, but just a tiny bit. Normally I would have half of my body and a tiny bit of the road. So that is very good. Not only do they look nice and expensive, they do a really good job. And in terms of safety and using this bike as a daily, to me that is a massive plus point. I haven't mentioned my favourite part about the controls yet, and that's even better than the throttle. It's the gear lever. Oh my goodness. It is so nice and positive. And the biggest compliment I can give this gear lever that I control with my left foot is that I would compare it to a Porsche manual 6-speed gearbox, or the Honda Civic Type R, the FL5 that I've tried relatively recently. Two fantastic manual gearboxes that are so shotgun-like, and this is just, whether you go down the box or up the box, it's just lovely. Really, really good. So chapeau to Ducati, or whatever the Italian saying is. Bravo. Oh, I'm terrible with languages, as you can probably tell. What I'm not so convinced about are the levers. They're beautiful to look at and to touch, but they're just so big, and I can't seem to adjust them close enough to the bar. But I think that might be a me problem, because I'm used to levers on mountain bikes, and I like small compact levers, and I like them to be really close to the bar, whereas the majority of motorbikes I've tried, well, they're all so big and they all sit so far away from the bar, even when you adjust them in. I do know that they are adjustable. Cheeky little wheelie. I think it has wheelie control, because I've felt the front end lift off the ground a few times under sort of second gear acceleration, but then it starts kissing again the tarmac, which is a good thing. Now let's talk about this V-twin. Is it an 895, 890? I can't remember. Anyway, makes no difference. It's an interesting engine. When I first rode this bike, I didn't think much of it. And that's because I'm a beginner. And as you've probably seen on the video, I don't rev this bike beyond about 5,500 before shifting. Because I still ride bikes like I drive cars, which is silly, unless I'm really pushing it, or recently when I was on track with Ducati, I was learning to rev it all the way out to 10, 11,000 RPM. Down below 5, although Ducati have stated that this new engine has much more mid-range punch, it's not as strong as BMW's, let's say, F900 XR that I tried out in Spain a couple of months ago, or the same engine that's in my F900 GS. That has wonderful low down and mid-range punch. And I really think that the BMW's motor is better, let's say, below 6,000 RPM. So that's going to appeal to us car guys. But where this really, really comes alive is up above 6.5, 7. And as we talked about in the intro, that's where all of the maximum torque and the maximum power are. On the BMW, I think maximum torque's about 6,500 RPM, whereas on this it's nearly 8,000 RPM. So very much a sort of top-end engine. And I tell you what, although just like many sports cars, when you rev this thing out, well, you don't have to go through many gears before you're going over the speed limit. But it's just wonderful. It really loves to rev. It really rewards you once you get it up there. And I have experienced this engine on that Panigale V2S at Donington about a month ago. And again, with that bike, you really needed to rev it hard. That was calibrated or tuned slightly differently, the Panigale. It has a bit more power, and the torque in the middle field, it just feels slightly different. I know they've given it a bit more top end. It's also a little bit lighter. But yeah, it's a real sweet engine. In the 5 days that I've had this, I really have loved the fact that it's got a physical key, because I haven't lost that key. It's always been with me. I know where it is, I know where it lives. So if you're looking at any bike and you're tossing up between keyless or old school key, I would honestly go old school key. There is nothing wrong with that. If you stop and I want to open a pannier or take the panniers off, I know where the key is. I don't have to go searching for it. And I know that maybe the younger audience watching this might think that I'm just being an old man, but yeah, that's great. It really is nice to have a key down there. Right, let's now talk about this bike's handling, because to me it really does inspire confidence. It's got good brakes, it feels nice and light, and it changes direction relatively well. Remember, we've got a 19-inch front wheel compared to my 21 on the F900 GS, and that just helps it change direction. Like I said earlier, I've actually got pannier boxes on both sides with gear in them, but I can't feel them being on there, so they do a really, really good job. We'll come down this dip over the brow at 60 miles an hour, down 2 gears, making sure there's no gravel and dirt on the road. It's brilliant. It really is. It feels great. It definitely feels more sporty and dynamic than, let's say, BMW's 1250 GS or even their 1300 GS. And I guess you would expect that because it is a lighter bike. It's a smaller bike. Does it feel better than BMW's F900 XR? Because I guess if we're talking BMWs, that's what you're going to compare this bike with. Or maybe even BMW's F900 GS Adventure, a bike that I haven't tried. So we're going to stick to the F900 XR. And I've tried the very recent updated version with the lighter weight wheels, etc. And I was really, really impressed with that bike. If we're looking at prices, well, the BMW, once you option it up to a similar package as this V2S, so the fancy suspension and a few other bits and pieces, I mean, you're looking at about 13.5 grand, maybe 14 grand. So actually, although it's still 3 or 4 grand difference, you're gonna expect that. This looks like a more expensive bike. It has a Ducati badge. You're paying a little bit of Ducati tax, but you are getting some things like the suspension that are just better. They are better. They do an incredible job when you knock everything back, and they support the bike really nicely when you pump everything up and put it into sports. Also, just, you know, little details like the levers, the bars, the stem. There's a lot of things on this that just feel like they're slightly better quality. There are things on here that feel like they're not as good quality, like the screen is definitely no better in terms of quality. This, I'm not impressed with. That's probably the biggest low point in this bike, as far as I'm concerned. But you definitely feel like you are on more of a premium bike. That's not to say it's a better bike. I think they're both really good bikes, and they both represent decent value at their price points. But if you have got a bit of extra money, and I don't know what the finance deals and quotes are like on both examples, because this has probably got better residuals than the BMW, so therefore the monthlies probably aren't massively different. It's worth taking one of these out for a ride. But in my opinion, you need to take it for a proper ride, not just half an hour, because the first half an hour for me, well, yeah, it didn't really do too much, but it's a few days later, and I appreciate not many people can do that or are fortunate enough to get a bike for a few days. But hopefully you can trust my word that a few days of living with this, it's really started to get under my skin, and I've really, really enjoyed it massively. And I appreciate lots of the stuff that I didn't appreciate when I first got on it. So I'm not sitting on the fence, but I am going to say that for 13-14 grand, an F900 XR with all the bits is a really good bike. If you have got the extra budget, this is probably a better all-round package, although they do both have their pros and cons. Well, as we slow the pace down and actually engage cruise control, it's not a radar cruise, it's a regular normal cruise, but it works really well. Very easy little toggle switch here, slower, faster, 1 mile an hour increments. And actually I prefer the fact that it's not a radar cruise or adaptive cruise, whatever they call it, because, well, they annoy me in cars as well. If I set a cruise control, I want to set it at a speed and I want the car or the bike to stay at that speed, and if I need to change it, then I change it. It then doesn't get confused by people that cut you up, or cars and buses and trucks in other lanes, etc. It also keeps you on the ball a little bit more. Right then guys, hopefully you enjoyed my not review of the Ducati Multistrada V2S. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Leave any comments and questions below, and I'll see you at another one very, very soon.